An excusable delay means if there's an owner delay, then they'll just add more time to the project, but you won't be compensated. My advice would be to consider having some language in your contract that makes owner delays compensable, because you have general conditions costs, you have opportunity cost. If they delay and they don't meet their commitments, you should get compensated accordingly. Hey, I'm Todd Dawalt. Thanks for joining the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. If it's your first time joining us, we are all about helping construction business owners systematize your business so you have more freedom, more impact, and more wealth. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been frustrated or disappointed, or maybe even worse, by the architect you've been working with, or the engineer you've been working with, or the designer? Maybe even have you ever been frustrated by a lack of decisiveness or how slow your client makes decisions? If so, that's what we're going to talk about today. How to lead architects, engineers, designers, consultants who don't work for you, and in essence, how to lead from behind. So here are some of the most common problems that I've experienced and that I've heard from our clients. This topic came up on one of our Systematize Your Construction Business group coaching calls recently. It's also come up on some CEO Alliance group calls. How do you get architects to do better work, do faster work? So here are some of the top 10 problems that I've heard or experienced working with consultants, engineers, architects, and designers. Number one, incomplete documents. They're just incomplete. There's not enough details to actually construct from. Number two, they're poorly coordinated documents. They haven't done a good job of coordinating between the different design trades: architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, are not coordinated. In some cases, even site civil, you have plumbing, for example, the plumbing elevation, the plumbing drawings show an sewer elevation coming out of the building that's 2 feet higher than or even worse, 2 feet lower than the elevation shown on the civil plans. That's a huge problem. Number three, which is very common, it's the just enough to start syndrome. The designers do just enough to get a permit set in, just enough to get a bid set out, just enough to get whatever set that they need to submit. They do just enough, and they're not complete. Again, coordination misses. There are actual conflicts, say, between structural and HVAC, or structural and plumbing, for example. Number five, the wrong specifications or useless specifications. These vanilla blanket generic specs that they have been copied and pasted from a previous project. So they're either wrong or they're just useless, just filled with a bunch of information. Number six, the design process just takes too long. Interior designers just take too long to come up with a finished package. Architects are way behind and they delay projects by months. Designers and architects and engineers, we'll just call them consultants, who seem to ignore the budget. In some cases, I've run into this one where the design team seems more concerned about winning awards than the project. And number nine, changing things too late in the game. They continue to draw after the project has started, and they just need to stop drawing, but they're changing things late in the game. And number 10, slow response times to RFIs, submittals, questions, shop drawings, things like that. So those are some of the top 10 complaints, frustrations contractors have, whether it's commercial general contractors, commercial trade contractors, custom home builders, remodelers. It's universal. There's frustration with design consultants, especially those who don't work for you. So here are some solutions, right? If you're looking for some really practical tips and hacks to include in your process, I'm going to give you a bunch. And these are tips and hacks that I've picked up from running projects for over 20 years. Started running projects in 1997 and ran projects until, a little over 20 years. I've managed over $300 million worth of projects, residential, municipal, industrial, commercial buildings, ranging from small bathroom remodels up to $70 million construction projects. So these are some tips that I have picked up that have been tested and worked. So the first tip is avoid creating unnecessary psychological problems. Okay. A lot of the problems that you're dealing with could be self-created, and they are psychological problems you've created. So we want to, number one, avoid creating unnecessary psychological problems. So what I've seen is a lot of people will assemble a bear trap early in the project that they will then end up stepping into. So you don't want to assemble a bear trap. And what do I mean by a bear trap? Here's what a bear trap looks like. It's when you respond to questions like, how much is this going to cost? Or how long will this take? Or when can you get started? Those are questions that cause you to assemble a bear trap because you are unknowingly anchoring yourself to a price or a duration or a start date, and you're doing it too early in the process. So here's what you need to do. When it comes to pricing, embrace this philosophy. And you may want to write this down, and I'll share with you how you can get your hands on this entire list in a PDF form when we're done. Embrace this philosophy. This is a good response. When somebody says, how much is this going to cost? Say, quote, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 words. Pricing follows design and selections. If somebody asks, hey, can you give me a ballpark price? Quote those words. 5 words. Pricing follows design and selections. Okay? You don't give pricing until you have a design and complete selections. So avoid creating a bear trap. And what I mean by a bear trap is if somebody says, hey, how much do you think this is going to cost? Oh, we want to be great. We want to help the customer. We want to give them a custom experience, whatever. So you answer a question that you shouldn't even answer. And you say, well, I think it's going to be about this. And then 6 months later, the scope has tripled. They haven't made decisions. And then you come back with them with a final price. And what are they going to say? But you told me 6 months ago, they forget everything else, but that number you told them 6 months ago. So avoid creating that bear trap. So when somebody asks you early in the process, how long is this going to take? How much will it cost? Or when can you start? You should hear the creaking of the metal springs of a bear trap being opened, and just don't do that. So when it comes to avoiding creating unnecessary psychological problems, sometimes what you have to understand is sometimes what you don't do is just as important as what you do. Okay? Sometimes what you don't do is just as important as what you do. So don't answer questions that you don't have enough information to answer. You are under no obligation to give them guesses. And when they ask for an estimate, quite frankly, they don't really want an estimate, right? Everybody asks for an estimate, but they don't really want an estimate. What they want is a complete proposal based on design and selections. Okay. Another psychological problem you want to avoid is getting into a bidding war with yourself. I have asked this question at a lot of live events, and I'll say, all right, how many of you have put together a proposal and you've totaled it up, and then as soon as you get to the bottom, in your mind, you hear this thought that sounds something like, that's too high, they'll never be able to afford that, and you get into a bidding war with yourself. What's that based on? Nothing. The client hasn't seen it. It's based on this narrative in your head, and then you start cutting pricing and getting in a bidding war with yourself, saying, yeah, I think we could cut this here to make it more affordable. And it's completely arbitrary, and it's completely irrational, and it is a psychological problem that you don't need to create for yourself. A couple of other things. One other thing to avoid would be allowances. Avoid putting allowances in your contracts. We'll plug in an allowance for flooring. We'll plug in, I've seen this a lot on tenant improvement projects. We're going to plug in an allowance for a TI fit out, a tenant improvement fit out, $60 a square foot. We'll just plug it in. We'll sign a lease based on that. And that is a trap. Allowances are a trap. And they're actually a symptom of the just enough to start trap, which is something you want to watch out for. Watch out for doing just enough to start early on in the project, saying, let's just do just enough to start to get a contract signed. Let's do just enough to get an estimate out the door. Let's do just enough to get a lease signed if you're a developer. Let's do just enough to get a crew started. That's the just enough to start trap, and it's the root cause of a lot of chaos and a lot of profit bleeds. Also, avoid the fast track project. It's actually another word for the just enough to start trap. It's called a fast track project. It's a nice name for it, but it's basically saying, let's do just enough to get this first phase launched, and then we'll design the rest of it. And I've never seen that go well. So some of those unnecessary problems you want to avoid creating, just beware. Here's a practical tip that will help a lot. If you can sweep up a lot of these problems into one step, it's to have a project kickoff meeting with your design team and the client. Okay? So during the pre-construction phase, early on in the project, the very beginning of the project, have a project kickoff meeting. This can be in person, which is fine, or it can be via Zoom. Everybody uses Zoom now, thanks to COVID. And one of the benefits of Zoom is you can record the meeting, which is way better than having meeting minutes or notes. So here's a great question to kick off your kickoff meeting with. Ask this question, to go around the table and have everyone answer this question. Doesn't matter if they're a civil engineer, structural engineer, architect, mechanical, plumbing designer, interior designer, the client. Ask them to answer this question. At the end of this project, what specific results do we need to accomplish for this project to be a success for you? Let me say that again. At the end of this project, what specific results do we need to accomplish in order for this project to be a success for you? Or short version is, what's going to make this project a home run for you, Mr. Structural Engineer, Miss Architect, Mr. and Mrs. Client? What's going to make this project a success for you? And get those answers from everybody. So we're going to start by painting a picture of success at the end of the project. And I picked this up from Wes Palmisano, who I interviewed on episode 309 of the podcast. You may want to check that out. So start the project off by asking that question. Then you're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty. And in that kickoff meeting, I would recommend reviewing the proposed schedule that you've put together, and then ask each of the consultants, what would it take for you to hit these milestones? What would it take for you? These are the milestones that we need to hit in order to achieve this goal of having a project completed by a certain date. For example, review the milestones and ask, what would it take for you to hit these milestones? And you're going to ask for commitments on milestones like, what would it take for you to deliver the schematic design level drawings by this date? What would it take for you to deliver the DD level drawings? What would it take for you to deliver the permit set? What would it take for you to have the construction documents by this date? Maybe it's furniture layout, racking plans, whatever the case may be, and ask them to make commitments. And what you're doing is asking them to buy into the plan. And if there's something they need in order to hit those dates, then you can negotiate among the team. Okay, so you need, in order for you to get your part done, you need this part from somebody else. Okay, what would it take for you to get your stuff done so this person can get their stuff done? It's a great way to set those expectations and get commitments. You're not telling the architects and consultants when they need to deliver things. You are asking for their commitment. Very different. I would also ask for them to commit to turnaround time on RFIs, submittals, shop drawing questions. Ask them, what's a reasonable time frame? And if you think a reasonable time frame is 48 hours and they say they need 2 weeks, then you're going to talk about it now as opposed to when it's crunch time later on down the road. So you're asking for commitments up front in advance. I would also recommend reviewing the change order policy right off the bat. During the kickoff meeting, educate everybody on the change order process. How are we going to handle when a change comes up? When there's a change request, how do we process this? How is it captured? I would recommend having some documented way, some funnel through which change requests will go. Also talk about how delays will be handled right off the bat. Let's talk about how are we going to handle delays during the pre-construction process? Perhaps if key dates, if those milestones they just committed to aren't hit, there will be delays to the project. If you're in a construction project, you're already under a construction contract, talk about how delays will be handled. Weather delays, owner delays. If you don't get the information you need and those commitments aren't met, there will be delays. When it comes to improving the quality of the design documents you're getting, walk through, maybe even prepare a checklist of what you're looking for on the design documents. What do you need? What are you looking for on the design documents? And give them a checklist. Call it a quality control checklist. Call it whatever you want, but essentially give them a list that says, okay, as let's say it's at the beginning of the design process, let the architect know this is what we're going to need. We'll need cross sections. We need finish schedule. We'll need elevations at these specific places. We need details here. Let's say it's a commercial project, let them know you'll need a furniture layout so you can locate floor boxes and things like that at a certain point. But give them a checklist of what you need. Tell them what you need up front instead of waiting until you get the documents and it's go time and you don't have what you need. So we're going to agree in advance on what we need. So if there's a discrepancy, if the architect says, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do cross sections. I'm not going to give you those details. Then at least you'll know and you can deal with it then rather than later on when the meter is running and it's very expensive. So create a checklist of what you need from them on the design documents in advance. On larger projects, if there are some complex details, it would be wise to agree on what needs a mock-up, if anything. Do we need to create any mock-ups? So, for example, back in 2007 through 2010, I managed the design and development construction of a 250-unit senior living community. It is still there. It's an 18-story building. It was a $70 million construction contract. And with 250 units, if something's off on one unit and you wait until it's done to change it, you have some big problems. Even the slightest thing, adding one electrical outlet on a 250 unit building can cost tens of thousands of dollars to add one electrical outlet in each unit. Believe me, I went through that process. So we want to make sure that and agree on what do we need to mock up. So what we did on this project, because it was a 18-story building total, and it was an EFS exterior. There were a lot of details, several different colors. So we created it was probably a mock-up of the exterior wall assembly that was 20 feet tall. It had all of the details on it, the cornice work, the railing, all of the different colors. And we brought anybody who had an opinion about it in and said, okay, here's what we're planning to build. This is your opportunity to comment. Weren't right, and there were a few little details. But we figured that stuff out in advance, and we pre-agreed. We negotiated on what we were going to do based on a mock-up instead of negotiating on what needed to be done after thousands of square feet of EFS was completed. Okay. The other thing we did that was interesting was we decided to create one entire mock-up interior unit. So one entire unit, 2-bedroom unit, completely finished out. And we did that very early on so we could all agree on the level of finish, the fit and finish of the cabinets, flooring, the textured finish on the ceilings, paint colors. So we did that really early on. We, again, brought everybody who might have an opinion on this, walked them through and said, this is your opportunity. If there's something you want to change, let's change it now after we build one unit, rather than having to negotiate on how to change something with 250 units. Now, that's a large scale example, but on some of your projects, there may be some details that you want to have a mock-up for. Color samples on walls. There may be some exterior. You have stone, masonry, details, create a mock-up, and get whoever is going to have an opinion on it, give them the opportunity to opine on that before you complete the project. Okay. And then for bonus points during your kickoff meeting, we're still talking about your kickoff meeting. If you want to get bonus points during your kickoff meeting, go ahead and talk about the closeout and the punch list process. At the very beginning, go ahead and start talking about the closeout and the punch list process. Talk about what does substantial completion mean and educate them on that. So what you're doing is we're going to pre-negotiate or pre-agree on the process rather than what most people do, which is wait until you think it's done and then argue about what substantial completion means. So take these problems that you're dealing with and let's move them forward in the timeline and pre-agree on these things and set those expectations early on. And while you're at it, for bonus points, if you have a pay request approval process, go ahead and agree on that process. What is the turnaround time frame for pay requests? What's the approval process? Who needs to look at it? And you may even want to go ahead and schedule your OAC meetings months in advance. Go ahead and put them on the calendar, get commitments, and have a payment schedule completely nailed down and agreed to upfront. Again, those are for bonus points. Now, you may be saying, Todd, man, that feels really pushy. It feels like I'm coming on really strong, like I'm pushing these people and pushing these architects who don't work for me, pushing the client. But here's the thing. What you're doing is you're anchoring them to expectations up front, right? These issues, you get to choose, all right? These issues are very likely going to come up, and you just get to choose when you discuss them. Are you going to discuss them when there's a problem, when there's a difference in expectations on turnaround timeframes on an RFI and decision timeframes, or would you rather pre-agree or pre-decide on these things and pre-negotiate these things while everything's good? So what you're doing is anchoring them to expectations up front. So this concept of anchoring is very powerful. There's this thing about humans, and we tend to put a lot of emphasis on the first thing we hear, right? So if somebody has ever come back to you and said, when you shared a price and they've said, but you told me it was going to be some number that was lower, they were anchored to that number. You unintentionally anchored yourself to a number. So anchoring is very important. And people they'll either come up with their own expectations and fabricate them out of thin air, or you can anchor them to the expectations you want them to be anchored to. It's your choice. There's a great quote that I like. A guy named Neil Strauss said, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. Unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments. So your client has expectations. Every consultant has expectations. You have expectations. Let's get them out there and let's avoid premeditated resentments. Okay? All right. So now let's talk about your contract. There are some things you can do in your contract to lead the design team, to lead the consultants, and lead your clients. One thing you can do is to create a list of client commitments and key decision dates, either in your pre-construction services agreement or in your construction agreement. So what this would look like is you would create an exhibit in your contract that outlines the client commitments for decisions, selections, maybe even dates for owner-furnished scopes of work. If the consultants work for the client, then you can put those commitments in the contract, those commitments you got from the kickoff team or the kickoff call with the design team, put those commitments in there of when these things will be delivered to you. So again, there may be some owner-furnished scopes of work, and there's a potential gap there. If you're dealing with owner-furnished scopes of work, maybe it's a remodel project, and the client will handle hazardous material abatement or demolition. Perhaps the client is going to do their own landscaping. Maybe the client has their own low-voltage contractor. They're going to provide the furniture. Think about the gaps between what you're going to provide and what the client's going to provide. You want to close those gaps, or at least identify those gaps, and be sure to identify what the expectations are. that one, if there's something you haven't included in your contract, be sure to exclude that. And if there are things you'll need from the client in the way of design documents, owner furnished work, put those expectations and those commitments in an agreement as part of your contract. Then put those, if there are milestone dates, put those milestone dates in your project schedule so that the project slides if they miss those deadlines. If they miss their commitments, it shows that there will be a delay in the project, right? That's the reality. If they don't meet their commitments, then you have a couple of options. One, you can compress your work because of their inability or unwillingness to meet their commitments, or the project slides, which is what you should do. For bonus points, if you want bonus points in your contract, go do some research and understand the difference between excusable delays and compensable delays. Understand the difference between excusable delays and compensable delays. So the short version is an excusable delay means if there's an owner delay, then they'll just add more time to the project, but you won't be compensated. So my advice would be to consider having some language in your contract that makes owner delays compensable, because you have general conditions costs, you have opportunity cost. If they delay and they don't meet their commitments, you should get compensated accordingly. They should have some skin in the game. So bonus points, go understand the difference between excusable and compensable delays, and then consider adding some language in your contract that makes owner delays compensable. Up next is at some point during the design process, if this is, let's say you're involved in the design process, maybe it's a design build project, you've been brought in early on, a great idea is to perform a reality check at the right time in the process. And what that sounds like is at some point in the project, in the design process or the selections process, or more generally the pre-construction process, to say to the client, okay, based on the design to this point and what you've selected, this project is going to cost, insert a range of costs here. So based on what you've selected and based on the design we have, this is the cost range. Putting a range in there is very important so you don't get anchored to a number. And then you ask them, does that work for you? Do you want to move forward and complete the design and complete the pre-construction process based on that? So do a reality check at that point. And note, all of this needs to happen during pre-construction. You should not be doing reality checks during construction. That's where a lot of the chaos happens, is because you're reconciling budgets after construction has started. And that really puts you under the gun.
Hey, it's Todd here. And quick question I want you to think about. If something happened to you, would your family have access to all the information they need, like your trust, life insurance, and bank accounts? If you own a business, would someone have access to the information needed to run your business? Could they run payroll? Could they access bank accounts? Who would talk to customers? Would your business even survive if something happened to you? Having the right legal documents and having them where your family can find them is critical in the event of an accident, an emergency, or death. Having immediate access to the information and documents is crucial for your family members to enable them to make the decisions and ensure that they have access to the financial resources you've worked so hard for. Without the right documents in place and without them being in the right structure, your family could face unnecessary stress and financial challenges during what's already a difficult time. There are 42 documents and pieces of information your family will need if something happens to you. We've done the research here and we've talked to the experts, and we've put together a legacy planning checklist for you. You can download the legacy planning checklist for free at constructionleadingedge.com/legacy. That's constructionleadingedge.com/LEGACY. We'll also be rolling out a digital legacy vault program soon, so you can have all of this critical information in a secure digital location. So to get your legacy planning checklist and to be notified when we roll out the digital legacy vault, head on over to constructionleadingedge.com/legacy.
All right, so let's recap what we've covered so far. I've got a few more for you. But first of all, we want to avoid creating unnecessary psychological problems by saying things like pricing follows design and selections. Number two, have a project kickoff meeting with the designers, the consultants, and the client. And you're going to ask for commitments. Ask for commitments on key milestones and anchor them to expectations. Number three, you're going to include those client and consultant commitments and key decision dates in your pre-construction services agreement or in your construction agreement. Number four is to perform a budget reality check at the right point in the pre-construction process. And then number five is to have one of my favorite things to include in every pre-construction process is to have a page flip session at the right time. This would be a page flip session, for example, when the design documents are, let's say, 80% complete, and certainly before you start the project, get the design team together, the client, get the pre-construction team, selections coordinator, and get your operations team together. Bring in a superintendent. Ideally, it would be the person who's going to be running that project. Bring in a project manager, and it's called a page flip session because you're literally going to just flip through each page of the documents. And you're looking for conflicts, you're looking for questions, you're looking for gaps that need to be answered. And you're also getting the operations team an opportunity to look at these documents and get some buy-in into the process and get their unique perspective, looking for constructability issues, looking for conflicts, things like that. So have a page flip session with your team. And this one wants to be in person, ideally. Okay, now let's talk about a few things you can do during the project. You've successfully gone through the pre-construction process. You've set the expectations. You've received the commitments. You've anchored them to those things. You've put them in your agreement. Now, once the project starts, there's still some opportunities for chaos. So one of my favorite things to do that I would do on projects would be to create a schedule of change deadlines. Create some deadlines for changes. So what that would look like is, could be, for example, when we submit the permit application, we can no longer make any changes to the structural, the building envelope, the structure of the building, for example. It could be one of my favorite things to do at the end of a project, because what tended to happen a lot was clients would say, oh, by the way, can you add this? We want to change this carpet out here. Can you change this toward the end of the project? And it's really hard to order material or get selections, order materials and change things and get it delivered and installed in the last couple of weeks of a project. That's what a lot of this chaos would come up. So what I would say is near the end of the project, I would set a change deadline, or I called it a moratorium on changes. And I would say something to the effect of, okay, if a change request comes up past a certain milestone, let's say 90 days prior to substantial completion. So I would say, look, and I would tell them this in advance. Okay, our change deadline is 90 days prior to substantial completion. We can change things prior to that, but after 90 days, once we cross that 90 days from substantial completion threshold, we can't incorporate any more changes. We have to finish this project on time. We can do the work you want, but it would have to be a separate contract after we're done. Okay, so we're not telling them no, but we're telling them we can't incorporate any more work into this contract past the 90 days from substantial completion. It could be 30 days from substantial completion. It could be a week before substantial completion. It really depends on the size and the scale of the project. Because if you think about it, if, let's say, hopefully you have a good production schedule so that when you finish one project, you can go move right into the next project, and you're stacking up your projects the right way. And if a client makes a bunch of changes and they add 2 weeks to their project, that means a few things is going to happen. One, you have to push off the next project and go to a client and say, sorry, we can't get to yours because we have this other client here who can't make up their mind. Or you start the next project and you put your operations team in crunch mode, where they're closing out a project and starting a project, getting it started at the same time. So what I found is set the expectation. Again, we're setting expectations with the client. Look, at a certain point, we have to finish this project. We can't incorporate any more changes. So if you want changes, we have two options. Again, we're not telling them no. We're just telling them, look, if there are things you want to change, you have to let us know prior to 90 days from substantial completion. Or if something comes up after that date, we can talk about making it a separate project. Or we can refer you to somebody else who can do that work for you. Okay? Because you've got this machine you've built and you've got to get to the next project. Again, during the project, you want to reset expectations. Okay? You've set the expectations. You've done a good job of anchoring everybody to these expectations. But you want to continue to reset those expectations. Putting it in the contract is great, but people forget the contract. You can have it in the meeting minutes or have a recording of the kickoff meeting, but people will forget that stuff. So you need to reset those expectations throughout the project to everyone. So a good way to do that would be to push those commitments and milestones out in your weekly updates to clients and to the team. Let them know that this commitment is coming up. We're 30 days out from needing this commitment that we all agreed to. We're 2 weeks out from this. We're 1 week out from this, and letting them know. So you want to find those key milestones and just preach those milestones, push them out continuously. And I found that consultants actually like that, because really busy civil engineers, architects, structural engineers, designers, they're really busy, and you're helping them by answering two questions. This is when they're looking at an email. If they're really busy, they're trying to answer two questions. What do I got to do, and when do I got to do it? What do I got to do, and when do I got to do it? That's what I found consultants that's what they want to know. So if you can tell them, look, this is what you need to do, and this is when you need to do it, and you can let them know that in advance, they will appreciate that. And if there's a problem, they'll let you know, hey, I'm not going to be able to make this. So you have some time to adjust. So push those milestones out, preach those milestones, preach those commitments to your team. And remember to answer two questions. What do I got to do, and when do I got to do it? And then one more thing, during the project, when something comes up, it's inevitable. There will be something missing. There will be a conflict. There will be an RFI, a request for information that you have. Bring solutions and recommendations, okay? When something comes up, when you have a question or you need something, bring solutions and recommendations to your clients and to your design partners that you're working with. One thing I would recommend is to delete the words, please advise, from your vocabulary. Maybe this is a personal pet peeve, but I hated it. I had a project manager managed a project for me, and his favorite words were, please advise. Hey, here's a problem. If it's not solved, it's going to cost $100,000 and we'll probably lose 4 weeks of schedule. Please advise, which is ridiculous. So eliminate the words please advise from your vocabulary. So if there's an issue, bring a recommendation. If you have a question, bring a recommendation. Don't ask for them to come up with a solution, because when you ask for a solution, there's a pretty good chance they'll come up with a solution that's not feasible. It's one that you don't want to do, that doesn't make sense. There's something that they don't see that you can see. So offer a recommendation. Like, for example, classic example, we had this was a 100,000 square foot industrial building with about 30,000 square feet of office space. And late in the project, the client said, in this one area that was probably 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, we want vinyl tile instead of sealed concrete, polished concrete. We want vinyl tile. Okay. So the contractors just ask, what vinyl tile would you like? And as is usually the case, the architect spent a couple of weeks and went back and forth. The owner got the right people together. They selected this vinyl tile only to find out it had a 6-week lead time, which pushed them out past substantial completion. So what they should have done was only offered vinyl tile selections that were available in the time frame they needed. So don't ask, please advise, because you're just opening the door to get answers you don't want or answers that won't work. So offer selections or offer suggestions, offer a couple of recommendations that will work, and you vet them out in advance before you even offer them. Okay. So there you go. Those last few, just to recap, have a page flip session at the right time during the pre-construction phase. Once you get into the construction phase, create a list of change deadlines, set a moratorium on changes toward the end of the project, continually reset those expectations, preach those commitments, answer the question, what do I got to do and when do I got to do it? Put those commitments into your weekly updates, and then eliminate the words, please advise, from your vocabulary, and always bring solutions and recommendations. So share this with your team. This is going to make everybody's life easier. So I want you to imagine this. Imagine that you're doing these things, and imagine that you're confident that your field team has everything they need to finish. They have complete design documents, accurate specifications, complete selections. You have the confidence that you know what you're going to build, and you have the pricing because you know exactly what you're going to build before you start the project. And think about it from your client's standpoint. Imagine they know exactly what they're going to get and how much it's going to cost before you start the project. What would that do for your confidence? Your confidence in your ability to hit your financial targets, right? Your confidence in your ability to finish a project on time. Imagine that your design partners are delivering high quality designs, and they're doing it in a more timely manner, so that when it hits your estimator's desk, or when you hand off a project to project manager and superintendent, they have everything they need. They're complete. They have all the details that your team needs to build it. And it's operating like a true partnership. Imagine that your clients are clear on the expectations, and they're clear on what they need to do. That they're making the decisions during pre-construction instead of during the construction phase, or maybe too late. Imagine that you're starting your projects on schedule. That you have a master project schedule, and you can stagger your starts, and if you set a start date 6 months from now, you have confidence that you're actually going to be able to start that project at that point, and your staff knows what's coming. And think about, when you're doing this, what will this do to the number of changes, the change requests that come up on projects? It's naturally going to reduce those changes because these decisions are being made in advance, right? And imagine, what's it going to do to the level of chaos that you're currently dealing with, or that your team is dealing with? All that chaos is going to go down, right? Because these things are being pre-decided, pre-negotiated, you're pre-agreeing to how things are going to be done. And really specifically, what is that going to do to how many phone calls and texts you get on a daily basis when your team has everything they need, clients are making decisions in advance? Your phone is going to ring a whole lot less. All right. So this is the key. It can be done. I've done it successfully. And you have a choice at this point. Okay. You have a choice. If you're frustrated with the quality and the timeliness of the decisions and that your clients are making, if you're frustrated at the quality and the timeliness of the information your consultants are giving you, then you have a couple of options. You can just do nothing, just keep bitching and complaining about it, being a victim, or you can get in the driver's seat and do something about it. You can implement some strategies. And this is a different mindset, right? You're going to get in the driver's seat, take on a driver's seat mentality, and drive this process, because you have a lot to lose. You have a lot to gain by doing this. So get in the driver's seat, be proactive, do these things early on, and it will work. So if you want to download this list and have a summary, a PDF summary of all of these tips that I've shared, you can go to constructionleadingedge.com/338. and you can download that PDF for free. This is episode 338. So go to constructionleadingedge.com/338. Download this PDF. You may want to share this with your team, share this with your project managers, your pre-construction team, and be proactive. A couple of other resources to share with you. I mentioned one episode, and there's another one that I would recommend you check out. First is episode 309 with Wes Palmisano, where he talks about the impact that focusing on pre-construction had on his business and how it was one of the keys to growing his business to $250 million in revenue. And you may also want to check out episode 332 of this podcast. It's about the pre-construction deficiency. Maybe you're showing some signs of a pre-construction deficiency. That's episode 332. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but if there's a specific topic you're looking for and you're wondering, is there an episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast about this topic? You can go to constructionpodcast.com and look at our directory, and there's a way to search. You can just type in pre-construction, type in handoff, type in design, and you'll be able to find episodes that have those keywords. So go to constructionpodcast.com to check out the podcast directory. And then if you need some help with getting your pre-construction process designed in a way that your team will actually follow it, and having somebody who's accountable for nailing the handoff from the office to the field, and having that process, that pre-construction process documented, even baked into your software. So your software like Buildertrend, CoConstruct, Procore, JobTread does all of the automatic remembering and reminding. If you want all of that, then I would encourage you to go check out our Systematize Your Construction Business program. And we're going to help you nail the handoff and get your pre-construction process dialed in and designed in a way that your team will actually follow it. And you can do that by going to constructionleadingedge.com/apply. Apply for a call. You'll be able to fill out a brief form there, tell us a little bit about your business, and then you'll be able to schedule a call with my team, and we'll walk through that process, what it looks like working with our team. So you can do that at constructionleadingedge.com/apply. Got a couple of things to share with you after this, so stick around for a minute, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
Hey, it's Todd here. And one more thing before you go. Look, if you own a construction business and you want to put the right systems in place so you can either scale it up, maybe you want to step away from it, be able to take a proper vacation, maybe you want to sell it someday, maybe you just want to have more freedom, or maybe make it more profitable, or maybe you just want to get out of constant firefighting mode and make your phone stop ringing all the time. You really have three options if you want to make a meaningful change in your business. Option one is do nothing. Status quo, keep doing the same things, getting the same results. Option two, you can DIY it. You can do it yourself. You can reinvent the wheel. You can read books, listen to podcasts, try to piece together a solution, use trial and error. Or option number three, if you want meaningful change, is to find a proven system that delivers the results you're looking for. Sort of like if you use software for project management or for your bookkeeping, I assume you probably didn't try to code your own software. You found a proven system that delivered the results you're looking for, right? Well, if you're looking for a proven system to systematize your business, we've helped hundreds of construction business owners implement our systems in their business, specifically our nail the handoff pre-construction process in their business. It works for home builders, remodelers, commercial general contractors. It also works really well for trade contractors like electricians, concrete contractors, site, utility, plumbing. And it's part of our Systematize Your Construction Business program. So if you want to see what systematizing your business looks like, what nailing the handoff looks like, and the positive side effects that come with that, then the next step would be to schedule a free business evaluation call with my team. And you can do that by going to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, APPLY, or just go to our website, constructionleadingedge.com, and tap the Apply Now button. You'll learn about the 5-step process we've helped hundreds of people implement to systematize their construction business. Most importantly, you'll get an objective third-party evaluation of your business to answer one really big question. Is your business designed to fail, or is it designed to succeed? So let me ask you this. If your business was unintentionally designed to fail, when would you rather find out? Now, while there's time to do something about it, or later on when it's maybe too late? This business evaluation call is totally free. There are no strings attached, no pressure. And it could be the best hour you've spent working on your business in a long time. So our schedule fills up pretty quickly. So if you're interested, go over to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, or go to constructionleadingedge.com and tap the Apply Now button to book your business evaluation call. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you got value out of this podcast. If you could take a moment, if you did, and leave a rating or a review or share this with somebody who needs to hear it, I would appreciate it. Todd Dawalt from Construction Leading Edge. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.